If I told you that some of the most chilling alien encounters on record didn't happen in the American Midwest or on the lonely highways of Nevada, but on the quiet edges of Australia, encounters so detailed, so eerily consistent, that us intelligence quietly reviewed them, would you really want to hear what those witnesses saw? Or would knowing it keep you from ever sleeping again? You're about to hear a story that is never fully settled in the minds of those who lived it. A story that begins in Australia, stretches itself across the Pacific, brushes against classified American files, and then circles back with a question that still terrifies the people involved. Because once you hear it, you might start noticing the strange connection between what Australians reported in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, and what American servicemen and civilians would later describe almost word for word. These encounters were different, calmer, quieter, and yet disturbingly intimate, as if whatever was watching wasn't testing weapons or scouting targets, but studying us in ways we still don't understand. Our story truly begins with a man named Ethan Clark, an American backpacker who left Seattle at 21 to explore Australia before settling into a normal life. Ethan wanted beaches, hostiles, adventure, nothing more. But what he got instead was a memory he spent years trying to bury, a memory that resurfaced only when a retired Australian police officer contacted him decades later, asking a question that shook Ethan to his core. Do you remember the child that wasn't there? Ethan didn't know how this stranger could possibly know the part of the encounter he never told anyone, not even the girlfriend who was with him that night. And so Ethan, now in his late 40s, sat down to finally tell the full story to an American documentary podcast. What you're hearing now is that reconstruction, his testimony, the testimonies of those who came forward after him, and the strange thread tying them together. Ethan said the night began like any other in the Outback. He and his girlfriend, Megan, had parked their rental van on a dirt turnout off Stewart Highway, far from city lights, surrounded by an ocean of darkness where the sky felt impossibly huge. They lay on top of the van watching the stars, laughing at how bright the Milky Way looked compared to anything back home. It felt peaceful, beautiful, until it didn't. Around 2:30 a.m., Megan nudged him and asked, "Do you hear that?" Ethan listened. There was no wind, no insects, no crickets, just an almost painful stillness, like the air had been vacuumed. Then, without warning, every shadow around them deepened at once, as if the darkness itself had thickened. Ethan sat up, staring into the horizon. A pale blue glow began forming in the distance, rising slowly like a second moon. At first he assumed it was a truck cresting a hill, but the light didn't cast shadows. It didn't flicker, and it wasn't moving along the road. It was floating, growing brighter and brighter, until the entire landscape was washed in cold, bluish-white radiance. Megan whispered, "Ethan, get in the van." But neither of them moved. The light stopped, hanging perfectly still. Then it expanded, no sound, no vibration, just a silent, swelling sphere of light that seemed to breathe. And in that moment, the strangest thing happened. Ethan felt warmth in his chest, as if something was scanning him, not physically but internally, like a soft pressure against his thoughts. That's when they saw the figure, a silhouette, standing maybe 30 yards away, small, child-sized, perfectly still. Ethan blinked and it vanished. Megan gasped and grabbed his arm. "It was right there, did you see it?" Ethan didn't answer because he wasn't sure he had. Then came the sound finally, a sound. A thin, metallic hum that vibrated deep inside the chest more than in the ears. The light contracted instantly, pulling itself into a single point in the sky before shooting upward so fast it didn't fade. It simply wasn't there anymore. Like someone had switched off the universe. The insects returned. The world exhaled. And Ethan and Megan sat in silence, unable to speak. Hours later, they drove until sunrise without saying a single word about what they had just seen. For months, they tried to pretend the encounter was nothing more than exhaustion or a hallucination, or some strange Australian atmospheric event. But Megan never slept well after that. She would wake up at night convinced she heard someone whispering her name. Ethan began having dreams of standing in an endless white corridor with soft blue light pulsing on the floor. And always in the dream was a small figure at the end of the hall, motionless, waiting. Years passed. They broke up, married other people, built separate lives. Ethan managed to push the memory down so deeply it became a distant echo until the email arrived. The sender claimed to be a retired police officer from Victoria named Robert Wake. The message was short but chilling. Mr. Clark, I believe you saw the same child I did. We need to talk. Ethan ignored it. Then the second message came. And the third, and finally a scanned document, an old, faded police report with his own name, written in the notes. That got his attention when they finally spoke on the phone. Robert said he witnessed the same type of light in 1987 while responding to a missing person call near a forested reserve. What he described mirrored Ethan's encounter, to the unnatural silence, the blue-white radiance, and the child-sized silhouette. But Robert saw something Ethan hadn't. He saw eyes, jet black, almond-shaped, reflecting light like polished stone. The figure wasn't moving. It wasn't breathing, but it was watching him. And just as he raised his flashlight, it dissolved into the air like smoke caught in a gust of wind. Robert never filed the real report. He wrote it off as a misidentified child in shock and closed the case. But he never forgot. Not until years later, when he read an archived American military account from 1975 from a base in New Mexico, describing almost word for word the same figure, the same light, and the same corridor dreams that followed. That's when he began searching for other witnesses, and that's how he found Ethan. What neither man knew at the time was that dozens of Australians had seen similar apparitions stretching back decades. Many of them never went public, but a few agreed to tell Robert their stories. Anonymously. One was a woman in Perth who described waking up on a beach at 4 a.m. with no memory of how she got there and seeing small footprints around her in the sand that led nowhere. Another was a trucker who swore he saw a child standing in the middle of an Outback road at night, but when he slammed the brakes, the figure passed straight through the front of his truck like a shadow. But one testimony stood out: a farmer named Neil Harrow, whose experience was so detailed and so strange that American investigators purportedly requested a copy of the recording. In the late 1990s, Neil claimed he was tending to his livestock late one night when he saw a floating light drifting above a paddock. He grabbed his flashlight and walked toward it. As he got closer, he heard whispering, soft, layered whispering that didn't match any language he knew. His flashlight began flickering. His vision grew blurred as if the world was bending around him. Then he saw them, not one figure, three small, childlike silhouettes standing in a triangle. Their heads were slightly too large, their arms too long, and their bodies surrounded by a faint shimmering distortion, like heat waves rising from asphalt. One of them tilted its head, and Neil felt something inside his skull, not a voice. A push, a gentle but undeniable pressure that made his knees buckle. He said he fell to the ground, but what he remembered next wasn't the dirt or the night sky. It was a white room, impossibly bright, impossibly silent. And that same blue pulse glowing beneath the floor, the same hallway Ethan dreamed about. Neil said the room felt alive, like being inside a lung. The air vibrated with a soft hum that seemed to come from the walls. And there, in the center of the room, was a tall figure, taller than any human. Lanky, fluid, featureless, watching him with an expression he couldn't read. Then everything went black. He woke up hours later, lying face down in the paddock, clothes untouched. No sign of the figures, no sign of the lights. But that wasn't the disturbing part. The disturbing part was that he woke up with a memory that wasn't his, something he described as a picture inside my mind. A picture of a coastline he had never seen. A rocky shore with dark waves crashing against strange, geometric formations that didn't look human-made. He couldn't explain it. He couldn't forget it. And when he showed Robert a sketch of that coastline, Robert froze, because he had seen something almost identical in a government file years earlier. Location said to be somewhere in the South Pacific, but never publicly acknowledged. A place allegedly tied to strange sonar returns, unusual magnetic readings, and inexplicable disappearances of small aircraft. Robert shouldn't have had access to those files, but he did. And after hearing Neil's story, after hearing Ethan, and after comparing all the testimonies, he began to believe something far more unsettling. These encounters weren't random. They weren't isolated. They weren't even uniquely Australian. They were part of a pattern, one that stretched across oceans, linking witnesses who had never met, never spoken, and lived decades apart. A pattern suggesting these beings were not just observing us, but selecting us. For what purpose? No one knew. Ethan didn't want to believe any of this. But then Robert asked the question that shattered him. Ethan, in your dreams, does the hallway ever end? Ethan's breath caught, because yes, it did. Once, in his final dream years ago, the figure at the end of the hallway stepped backward into a doorway that Ethan could never reach. And inside that doorway he saw a landscape briefly, only for a second, but unmistakable. Dark waves, jagged geometric shapes, a coastline, the same one Neil described. It wasn't a dream, it was a memory. Something had shown it to him. But why? Why show a handful of people the same impossible shoreline? Why leave them with identical dreams, identical figures, identical whispers? Why appear to Australians, Americans, truckers, farmers, backpackers, police officers, all at different times, always in the same silent, terrifying way? Robert had a theory. One he never shared publicly. One he told Ethan only once. He believed these weren't visitations, they were invitations, that the beings were preparing certain people, calibrating them. He said for something coming, something global, something that required human minds that could understand a different form of communication, imagery, emotion, shared memory. But invitations to what? The answer seemed to come from a woman named Marissa, a geologist from Queensland, whose story was so bizarre that even the Australian government dismissed it. Marissa claimed she followed strange magnetic readings along a remote coastline for weeks, until she reached a cliff overlooking the ocean, and below her, far below, she saw faint blue lights flickering deep underwater in a repeating pulse. a pattern, a rhythm, a signal. And in the instant she leaned forward with her binoculars, she felt that same internal pressure so many witnesses described a soft push against her thoughts. She fainted. When she woke up, 3 hours had passed. Her GPS had stopped working, and all she remembered was a single, overwhelming impression. "You're not ready yet." Those were the words she felt, not heard. "You're not ready yet." She was so terrified she moved to the United States within the year and never returned to Australia. So what were they preparing for? If these are invitations, why show a coastline? Why show a corridor? Why appear as childlike silhouettes to some and towering creatures to others? The answer may lie in the one part of Ethan's story he never wanted to share. Not until now. He admitted that during the first encounter, in the moment the light expanded and the air thickened, he felt something else, a presence inches behind him, a breath that wasn't Megan's. And when he turned, for just a split second, he saw a face. Not the small figure in the distance. A different one, a tall one, only inches away, watching him with eyes so black they swallowed the starlight. And then nothing, like his memory had been wiped. He never told anyone. Not Megan, not Robert, not the podcaster, because that wasn't the part that terrified him. The part that terrified him was understanding, years later, that the tall figure wasn't there to contact him. It was there to retrieve the small one, because whatever these small figures are, they're not children. They're scouts, assistants, biological drones, or something else entirely. And the tall ones are their caretakers, their overseers, their collectors. And if Ethan saw one up close, it means he wasn't just a witness. He was selected. But the story doesn't end there. Last year, Ethan returned to Australia for the first time in decades after receiving one final email from Robert. When he arrived, he learned Robert had died 3 days earlier of unexplained cardiac failure. A sealed envelope had been left behind for Ethan. Inside it was a single photograph, a coastline, jagged, geometric, dark waves crashing onto strange polygonal formations. The same one from Ethan's dreams, the same one from Neil's memories, the same one from the classified file, the same one Marissa saw glowing under the Pacific. On the back of the photo was a handwritten message: "If the corridor ever ends again, don't follow it." Ethan says he hasn't dreamed of the hallway in years, but last month it returned. The blue pulse beneath the floor, the endless white walls, the soft hum, and the small figure standing at the end, waiting. Only this time it stepped aside, revealing the door, and Ethan woke up before he saw what was behind it. He doesn't know why the dreams came back. He doesn't know what triggered it. But he says the pulse was stronger than ever, almost urgent, almost like a countdown. And the worst part, he swears he heard the smallest whisper echo behind him as he woke up. A whisper he had never heard from them before. It said only one word: soon. And that's the final thread of our story. Because if all these witnesses across continents are remembering the same light, the same figures, the same corridor, and the same impossible coastline, then maybe these encounters aren't the disturbing part. Maybe the disturbing part is what comes next. A moment none of us are ready for. A moment they've been preparing certain minds to witness. A moment that, according to Ethan's final dream, is almost here.